Hello, I'm Russell Haythorn with Denver 7 and welcome to Denver Decides. This community partnership is dedicated to accessible and transparent elections. The partnership includes the League of Women Voters of Denver, Inter-Neighborhood Cooperation, and is presented by Denver 8 TV. Our mission today is to present a ballot issue forum in anticipation of the general election coming up on Tuesday, November 3rd. Among the numerous amendments and ordinance questions on this year's ballot is Referred Measure 2B. This measure is a bill for an ordinance increasing the sales and use tax by a rate of 0.25% and dedicating the revenue derived from the tax rate increase to fund housing, shelter, services, and other things for those experiencing homelessness and those who have also exited homelessness. Our format for this forum will follow a basic debate outline with opening and closing statements, cross-examination, and will include responses to questions submitted by the forum organizers. Let's begin by meeting the participants who will present and discuss the pros and cons of Measure 2B. Beginning to my right is Councilwoman Robin Kniech. Robin is the councilwoman, one of the two at-large council members on Denver's City Council, and she will be speaking in favor of Referred Measure 2B. And on my left is Mr. D.K. Williams, a 16-year Denver resident, former state chairman and legislative director of the Libertarian Party of Colorado, and former statewide candidate for office. He will be speaking against Referred Measure 2B. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
We will begin with 1-minute opening statements from both of you as speakers. Councilwoman Kniech, you're first, speaking in favor of Referred Measure 2B.
Thank you. I don't just come to this issue as a policymaker. In high school, I volunteered with kids at a shelter for homeless families while their parents were working to find jobs and housing. No one looked homeless. Hundreds of families, more than 1,800 DPS school children in Denver are homeless right now today. I've volunteered with my own family at a homeless shelter on our block for women. These women, many of them fleeing domestic violence, often blend in as they go about rebuilding their lives. Our first image of homelessness is people on the streets, and 2B is important to reduce chronic homelessness like that, but it's just as important for those we can't see. What both groups have in common is that they never expected to be homeless. We'll talk a lot about what we can and can't see tonight, such as success. Denver has refined a supportive housing model that is housing thousands of families and individuals. And when someone gets that key, we can't see that success, but it's real. 2B will fund proven solutions like that housing and like 24/7 shelter.
Councilwoman, thank you for that opening statement. And now, Mr. Williams, your turn to deliver your opening statement in opposition of Referred Measure 2B.
Thank you. There's no doubt the homeless are a major problem that they desperately need our help. But this sales tax taxes them among other people. Sales taxes are the most regressive tax any government can impose. Sales taxes are aggressive because they take a larger percentage of income from low-income taxpayers than from high-income taxpayers. Regressive taxes impact those who can least afford it, including the homeless, those close to being homeless, and those on a budget where every penny matters. 1 penny sales tax on every $4 will be implemented if this passes. When you need something that costs $4 and you only have $4, that penny keeps you from getting what you need. Pennies matter to the poor, to the oppressed. If both of these sales taxes pass, which will be on the ballot, then this 0.25% tax doubles. That becomes 1 penny on every $2. That matters, and that is huge. We need to help the homeless, but taxing them, the very people we want to help to create another $3.2 million bureaucracy, is not the way to do it.
Mr. Williams, thank you for that opening statement. And now both of you have a chance to offer rebuttals to the other's opening statement. Mr. Williams, we'll start with you.
Thank you. I very much admire Councilwoman Kniech for trying to address this issue. It's not a matter of whether or not we should help the homeless. I definitely am 100% on board with that. And we should, and we need to. But the sales tax is the most regressive tax a government can impose. If we're going to try to help an oppressed, downtrodden group, there are some exemptions to the sales tax, but there's still things they buy that are not exempt. And when you have exactly $4, like I mentioned, exactly $4, you've seen people count out the change that they have in their pocket. And if they don't have that extra 1 penny on $4, they can't get what they need. So let's help them in a way that doesn't tax them.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. And now, Councilwoman, you have 1 minute to offer a rebuttal to Mr. Williams' opening.
Yeah. You know, 2020 has taught us that sometimes there are tools we wish we had. We wish we could fight the coronavirus with something other than this mask, but it's what we've got, and it's saving lives. The city of Denver has 2 primary tax sources we're allowed to use: sales tax and property tax. We chose not to go the property tax route because we understand that that affects housing, and we also understand our small businesses are challenged. The sales tax is a modest tax, and we understand and we don't take it lightly, but we believe that the cost of not acting is greater. Your tax dollars go to all of the side effects of homelessness, whether that's arrests in jail and courts, whether that is emergency medical services for someone who's experienced frostbite or an untreated medical condition. So would our community rather keep paying those costs, or would we rather pay more efficiently for the solution? The sales tax has been mitigated in Denver by exempting things like the food that you eat, the grocery store, the gas you put in your car to go to work, also water and medicine. None of those are taxed. All of those make it more effective.
Councilwoman, thank you for that. We can continue the conversation now. You both have the opportunity to cross-examine one another. And so in this round, you can ask questions of each other. And we will begin again with Councilwoman Kanish.
Thank you very much. As I mentioned in my opening, homelessness has many faces. We talked about more than 500 people who are fleeing domestic violence, 240 households with children, 195 unaccompanied youth. They all share a lack of housing in the middle of a pandemic. Are you proposing the city has no role to play in helping folks who are homeless?
No, absolutely. I'm not proposing that whatsoever. Okay. No. I'm just proposing that there are better ways to go about it than a sales tax, which does apply to them. I mean, if a single mother who's either homeless or close to being homeless is out of a job or for whatever reason, if she wants to take her children to McDonald's, this tax applies. And we're going to take 1 penny out of every $4 she spends there. If she spends $8, that's 2 pennies. And pennies matter to people that have to do their budget down to the penny. And so, yes, the city has a role to play. But I just don't think that this is the best, most effective, and socially just way to achieve that.
Mr. Williams, thanks for that response. And now, Mr. Williams, you have an opportunity to ask the Councilwoman a question.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Are there ways that you think that individuals in the city of Denver can help homeless people that don't even include the government? And should we not be able to spend energy, or should we not encourage people to do things to help the homeless and the poor and the oppressed that don't even require government?
Councilwoman.
The people of Denver have been very generous. You've given your time by volunteering, serving meals. You've collected socks and hats. You have given your treasure and your dollars to our shelters, whether it's the Denver Rescue Mission, whether it's Urban Peak to serve youth, whether it's the Colorado Coalition for Homeless. That charity has saved lives. Let's make no mistake about it. But charity isn't a solution to structural challenges. We have a housing crisis in this city, and housing is not affordable to people who are struggling to make ends meet, many of which who work and have an income. They can't get that first month's rent. They can't get that down payment. All the sock donations, all the food donations in the world, they are not going to be able to solve that structural issue. We have to build housing units. And that's a lot to ask in a charitable operation. We've been trying to do it with federal dollars and charity, and you have seen the effects. Our city's falling behind, and we risk falling further behind with this pandemic. Unemployment is going to cause an increase in homelessness. Historically, that's been true. We can't let this get further ahead of us. We need to act now.
Councilwoman, thank you for that response. We will continue the conversation now with cross-examination round 2. We are discussing tonight referred measure 2B, that is increasing the sales and use tax by 0.25% for homeless services and housing. And now, cross-examination round 2. Mr. Williams, you can ask another question of the Councilwoman.
Thank you. Do you think wouldn't there be a more fair and just way to raise revenue than a regressive sales tax? I mean, I know there's limitations on what the city government can do, but notwithstanding those limitations, aren't there other things that can be done that don't force the poorest and the most oppressed of us to pay this tax?
Thanks for that question. I wish we had more options. There are several progressive taxes in our country where they tax those who have more means a little higher. One is the income tax. That's prohibited for local governments in Colorado. Some have suggested that we tax wealthy properties, really expensive properties, more than we tax others. That's prohibited by Tabor. We have to have uniform taxation of properties in the state of Colorado. What if we were to take a little fee every time properties transacted and those who are purchasing those properties, and we put that money into a housing fund? Many cities do that. Guess what? That's prohibited by Tabor in the state of Colorado. Many of the most progressive taxes that would tax those with the most means are not available to us in the state of Colorado. I hope we work on some fiscal reform that gives us more progressive options. We looked at other fees in this case. We examined things like a sugary beverage tax. Some of those would have had an even bigger burden. We took the most prudent course, and I will just say, it's not just those with no means. One of the biggest payers of sales tax, airline fuel purchasers.
Councilwoman, thank you for that. And now it's your opportunity to ask Mr. Williams another question.
Mr. Williams, I hear you craving a different solution. What would yours be?
You mentioned the property tax. And another way to do this was if you raise the property tax the same on everyone, that's not going to affect the homeless by definition. They don't have property to tax. So that would be a way to go about to get to this resolution without taxing them. And I also think that there are people that live in Denver. There's some very affluent areas of Denver. It's a lot harder to ask them for money than it is to demand they pay a tax every time they go to the store and buy something that's not exempt. That very same tax that the people we're trying to help, they are being asked to foot, at least to some degree. And 1 penny to somebody who only has $1 is a lot more to somebody who has $100,000. And the person with the $100,000 is probably going to have property that the homeless person does not.
Mr. Williams, thanks for that. Moving on now to cross-examination round 3. And Robin, we'll start with you. You can ask Mr. Williams another question.
Let's talk a little more about taxpayer dollars. I mentioned some of the costs that the taxpayers are taking on now. Jails for people who get arrested for trespassing or public urination because they don't have a bathroom. Hospitals for those who have chronic health issues. When you compare some of those costs to the $5.25 a month that this tax will cost the average household, that's the cost to the average household. Those who buy less, it will cost them less. What is your weighing of those, and do you think we should just keep paying for the ineffective solutions that we have been?
Absolutely not. I'm a huge opponent of the war on drugs, which is something that you mentioned, which adversely and disproportionately affects the people we're trying to help here. And that is a government program, a government department that oppresses the people that don't have the ability to pay for the lawyers, or that are more subject to mental health issues, that are more subject to these addictive issues. And so those types of things we can cut back on. We can not worry about a lot of the things that these people are put in jail for. And I give credit to Denver, the people of Denver, for leading the way on marijuana legalization, which went a long way to that. And now with psilocybin. Those are the types of creative ways we need to progress in order to save the people that are being oppressed by taxes. Quit oppressing them, take the boot off of them, and let them succeed.
DK, thanks for that response. And now it's your turn. You can ask the councilwoman a question in this third round of cross-examination.
All right. So do you think that there are other ways to help these people that are oppressed, that are downtrodden, that are homeless, or on the verge of being on homeless or becoming homeless, that government could do less, like some of these police issues that the people that can't afford lawyers get harmed by, like the marijuana legalization and the psilocybin decriminalization?
Yes, I think that we have to actually think, this is not just that money is the solution. I think there is effective policy questions as well. One of those that's really important is to keep people housed. The more we could do renter protections to ensure that people have an opportunity to stay in their home, they have a little more time to work out a deal with their landlord, the more we can ensure that there's less discrimination against people if they're paying for their rent with maybe a voucher rather than just their own income, but they're putting the two together. Every time we keep someone housed, it's far more cost effective. And a lot of those things we have been either tackling at the city level with policy, or the state of Colorado recently prohibited that kind of discrimination I talked about based on how you pay. It shouldn't matter how you pay if your landlord gets paid. The other thing I will say is that Denver leverages every dollar we put into a supportive housing, and that is the solution we really want to talk most about tonight. 80% of the people we house in supportive housing are still housed 2, 3, 4 years later. Highly effective. One of our dollars leverages $9 in federal tax credits and private investment.
Councilwoman, thank you for that. The good news is you have one more round of cross-examination. So, Mr. Williams, it's your turn to start in round 4 of cross-examination. You can ask the councilwoman one last question.
All right. I think I have no more questions. Yep.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
yield the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Councilwoman, you have one last opportunity to ask Mr. Williams a question.
I think it's with great humility you and I debate this topic today because we may not have walked in the shoes of some of those we're talking about, and I know we're both doing our best to represent them. I know I did some surveying of folks experiencing homelessness, and I asked them how they felt about this proposal, and I asked them what their thoughts were. And I know you've passionately spoken that you don't think they should be paying this tax or that others like them. Would it surprise you to know that there was very strong support for this initiative among the people that you're advocating on behalf, and that many of them put supportive housing as their #1 priority that they believed these dollars could be used for to make a difference?
It would not. Oh, sorry. It would not surprise me in the least, because no group, including the homeless and the oppressed and the downtrodden, are a monolith. Certainly, there will be people there that would support this. There would be also people that do have to count out their change at the Walgreens every day to try to get the things that they want and need, that would not be able to do it, or it would certainly affect them negatively. So I have no doubt people support it. I also believe that there are people who do not.
Mr. Williams, thank you. Councilwoman, thank you for that cross-examination. We're now moving on to the card questions submitted by the forum organizers. There are 2 questions submitted by the organizers, and you'll each have 1 minute to answer these questions again. For our viewers, we're debating referred measure 2B, increasing the sales and use tax by 0.25% for homeless services and housing. And we will start with the card questions, and Councilwoman Kanish, I believe you will go first. And this is a question on housing. Does every law-abiding citizen have a right to shelter provided by the government? Otherwise stated, does the government owe each person a house?
You know, some state constitutions provide that kind of a protection. The state of New York, for example, has a right to shelter. Legally, that's not the case in Colorado, but I think it's up to each voter to think about what our moral compass tells us, right? Do we believe that a roof over your head is a human right? Do we believe that people deserve a chance to have a roof over their head and get a chance to get back on their feet if they've had a crisis, something unexpected happened to them? So I think it's a moral question more than a legal one. For me, the answer is if there are solutions that are being effective in our community, if providing 24/7 shelter helps keep someone safe while they work on getting their lives back together, if having services during the day, housing, counseling, mental health, helps them get back on their feet while I'm working to build more of those housing opportunities that they can move into, if I know those things work, then I think I have a moral obligation to try every method to put those into action. That's what this ballot measure provides all of us, is a question about whether we believe the same.
Councilwoman, thank you for that response. Mr. Williams, the same question on the topic of housing. Does every law-abiding citizen have a right to shelter provided by the government?
That's a very philosophical and deep question that I don't know if 1 minute will be addressed to address that in any meaningful way. I would suggest and I would encourage people to look up and explore the differences between negative and positive rights and the effect that they have on policy. Certainly there are wonderful policies that we should pursue. Now, whether or not something is a good policy and whether or not something is a right are separate issues, and I do not think they should be confused. So while we have the right, basically, in the Constitution, it's important to note that the Constitution stops the government from infringing on our rights. It does not give us any rights. Congress shall make no law to abridge the freedom of speech. Not, you have the freedom of speech. And there's no such thing in there legally that says you have the right to a house. The government cannot stop you from having one, and I think there's many ways the government makes that much harder. And so I think it's important to get the government out of that process of making it harder for you to find a place to live, which will go a long way to addressing the problem.
Mr. Williams, thanks for that response. Councilwoman, thanks for your response. Moving on to card question 2 from the organizers of this forum, and this is on regressive taxes. And Mr. Williams, we'll start with you. And I believe you alluded to this earlier in this debate, but some people say that sales taxes are regressive. The heaviest burden falls on those with the least income. Is this true, and why?
Well, I think we all have to admit it is true. I mean, 1 penny to somebody with $1 is a lot more to that person than 1 penny is to someone with $100,000. In that sense, there's no way to get around the regressiveness of a sales tax. And that's the main reason I oppose this proposal, this ballot measure 2B, is because it is regressive. And there's got to be a way to address this problem. I want to address the problem, but I do not want the problem to be addressed on the backs of the people we're trying to assist. So it is absolutely regressive. I don't see any way around that, and that's the major reason I oppose the proposal.
Mr. Williams, thank you for that. Councilwoman, same question, regressive taxes. Some people say that sales taxes are regressive. The heaviest burden falls on those with the least income. Do you believe that?
Denver has taken as many steps to mitigate the regressivity of our sales tax. I described the exemptions for food, gasoline for your car to get to work, medicine, feminine hygiene products. Each of these mitigates these impacts, but it still has an impact and it's real. The question we have to weigh that against is the cost of inaction. What does it cost the people experiencing homelessness? In health, in missed opportunities, in trauma. What does it cost our community to have people sleeping on sidewalks and parks rather than in homes, rather than safe and getting the support they need to get back on their feet? There is a cost to not doing this as well, and that too is borne by those who are the least able to pay it.
Councilwoman, thank you. Mr. Williams, thank you. We really do appreciate the robust and respectful debate here today. Moving on now, closing statements on referred measure 2B on the question of raising the sales tax, raising the sales and use tax, I believe, right? Yes. So closing statements now, and that brings us to those 1-minute closing statements, and we're going to reverse the order of the opening statements. So Mr. Williams, you may begin.
Thank you very much. I very much appreciate the opportunity to come and discuss this very important issue. Our homeless in Denver and throughout the country need our help, but taxing them another penny on every $4 is not the socially just way to do it. When you only have $4 and change and you're counting it out on the counter, and what you need costs $4 right now, 1 more penny keeps you from buying it. That's not the way to address this problem, I submit respectfully. A regressive sales tax that disproportionately and negatively affects the homeless themselves, not to mention the poorest and most oppressed among us that have homes but maybe just barely, is not the right answer. So I simply submit that for your consideration, a no vote on 2B is the socially just vote.
Mr. Williams, thank you for that closing statement. Councilwoman, it is now your opportunity to deliver your closing.
I just want to thank Mr. Williams, the moderator, Denver Decides, you the voters. Denver's a compassionate city. I know from the calls to my office every day that the people and businesses of our city are both concerned about the lives of people experiencing homelessness and frankly about the health of our community. 2B is our opportunity to come together. 2B will scale up proven solutions that I've described. Housing plus services equals stability. All-day shelter with services equals better health and housing outcomes. Denver has used these models to house more than 900 people since 2017. You can't see it because every key someone gets to a door is not visible to us the same way that someone who's still outside is. But with more than 4,000 people still experiencing homelessness, this is a necessity to act now, particularly before the pandemic increases homelessness. We want to prevent it. We want it to be rare. We want it to be short and temporary. Please vote yes on 2B and go to yeson2b.org to learn more or spread the word.
Councilwoman, thank you very much. Mr. Williams, thank you as well. Way to go. You both did very, very well here. On behalf of the forum organizers, I'd like to thank you both for your participation in this forum. We hope we have given you a fair look at the pros and cons regarding Referred Measure 2B. Again, this measure is a bill for an ordinance increasing the sales and use tax by a rate of 0.25% and dedicating the revenue derived from the tax rate increase to fund housing, shelter, and services for persons experiencing homelessness or having exited homelessness. Our thanks also to the Denver Decides partners, which include Interneighborhood Cooperation and the League of Women Voters of Denver. Denver Decides is presented by Denver 8 TV. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd. Let your voice be heard. Be sure you're registered and get out there and vote. For complete election information online, go to denverdecides.org. I'm Russell Haythorn with Denver 7. Thank you for joining us.